The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Thursday night was the perfect game for Matt LaFleur to keep the Green Bay Packers focused. They dominated.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast.
The Green Bay Packers had one of the more dominant sub 10-point wins you will see. This game, if you just look at the final score, is going to say 27-18. It was not anywhere near that close. In fact, the first time since 1995, the Packers have held their first two opponents to under 250 yards. This was a dominant defensive performance. And it really was a dominant offensive performance, 404 total yards, 6.4 yards per play. And that includes some give up, to end the first half, the Packers were averaging over 8 yards a play. They were getting whatever they wanted. And you can call it killer instinct. You can call it a lack of focus. You can call it a young team learning how, if you want to be maximally generous, how to be a championship caliber team. Call it whatever you want. This Packers team did not put the Commanders away when they had the chance. And oh boy, did they have chances. That's the thing. If you're Matt LaFleur, that's why I think this is the perfect coaching opportunity for Matt LaFleur. It is exactly what you want. You showed you are the best team in football, maybe. You just dominated the first time in modern history that a team has won, since the short week stuff, has won back-to-back games. So 2 games in 5 days against playoff teams from the previous year. These are big-time wins. And yet, the Packers could have scored 40 points in this game without a problem. And so that, you know what that does? That allows Matt LaFleur to be in his bag all week. To say, hey, you guys played well. You beat that team. You should have annihilated that team. This could have been 40-14. It could have been that kind of game. And I'm not saying, look, the Commanders are a good team. But penalties were a killer. I understand the penalties were weak. A lot of really ticky-tack, real nonsense penalties. The one on John Fitzpatrick where they get the first down and then it totally scuttles a drive. They were going to put that game away. But very first drive, Jordan Love has the chance to get Dontavian Wicks down the seam for a touchdown. The ball is slightly overthrown. Later in that drive on 4th down, this is the kind of detail Matt LaFleur is going to talk about all season. I don't know who it was. It looked like he was yelling at Kingsley Enagbare. I don't know if it was Enagbare, but someone came out on the field thinking field goal. The Packers were going to go for it. Love wanted to go fast. They wanted to take their shot. I think they wanted to run the play they ultimately called, but they wanted to catch the Commanders off guard. And you have someone not paying attention. They come onto the field and the ref holds the game up. And you don't get to keep, you don't get the sneak attack that you wanted, and you don't get to keep the momentum going. Then Jordan Love babies the throw to Matthew Golden, who was going to have his first NFL touchdown if the throw was better. Later in that quarter, Jordan Love misses Matthew Golden on what would have been a 96-yard walk-in touchdown. Now, they end up scoring, but they had multiple opportunities here. Now, look, some of the defensive holding calls were total nonsense. The Nate Hobbs call, soft. There were a number of the Xavier McKinney call, soft. There were a number of those in the game. It did seem like the league had made a phone call and said, hey, can you guys make this a little closer than it would otherwise be? But the Packers allowed that. the defense was stellar. I don't have anything, and we'll talk plenty about the defense, but the defense was outstanding. This game was there for the Packers offense to take by the scruff of its neck. And I understand part of this is the offensive line. Darian Kennard, Anthony Belton, they rotated at right tackle. Jordan Morgan, I think the tape will show an up and down game for him at left guard. This is a pretty good Commanders front. It's not a dominant Commanders front by any means, but they were pretty good in the run game. The Commanders were. The Packers could not run the ball in this game, despite the fact that the Packers tried to pull out some interesting stuff. Now, they were able to get the Savion Williams stuff worked really well. The Matthew Golden stuff worked really well. But none of the Josh Jacobs stuff worked, except the one time he got into the end zone. So the details here were not quite up to the standard. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say the offense was bad. You can't put up 400 yards of offense in a game and be bad. 27 points, you're not bad. But you want them to keep the throttle down. And there was that drive in the second half where Matt LaFleur comes out. And I know they're backed up in their own end. But, you had just gone up, just kicked the field goal. It is time to just end the game. And you go run, pass. There's nothing there. It's conservative. It was yuck. The Commanders come down and score. Now the Packers, what do? This is what you love. This is what you love. Drive starter, Dontavian Wicks. Play action, and you drive a dot to the sidelines on an out route, first down, drive starter. On 3rd and 6, Jordan Love escapes the pocket, finds Tucker Kraft down the field. You get the trick play. Savion Williams out of the Wildcat. I loved taking the speaking of Ferraris that you take out of the driveway. We don't know if he's a Ferrari yet, but he's a sports car. He might be a Miata, but he's a sports car. He gets an explosive out of Wildcat. You get a jet sweep to Matthew Golden. Play action, Tucker Kraft, touchdown. It was like Matt LaFleur said, okay, enough messing around. I'm going to call the real plays now. I'm going to, go down the play sheet, find the good stuff, and they win this game. Part of this is on Matt LaFleur. He has to stay aggressive. He has to stay aggressive, and this team has to stay locked in. We talked about the penalties. This was the Lions game was the most buttoned up with penalties. Like, they were as good as they could be. I think they only had 3 penalties in that week 1 game. Well, not in this one. 10 penalties, 77 yards in this one. And all of them seem to either extend drives or scuttle drives. That's a tough way to live. So for the Packers, this is a learning moment. We know how good they are. They know how good they are, but they also know this wasn't good enough. And so I remember having these conversations, 2019, 2020, 2021. The best gift a coach can get is when you have a comfortable win where you didn't play a great game. This was a B game for the Packers. And they beat a NFC championship team from last year by 2 scores. In a game that wasn't even as close as 9. That's where you want to be as a team. You show, hey, look, down to down, play to play. We might be the best team. Like the Packers, it's only 2 weeks. But right now, this Packers team might be the best team in football. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k or properties or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. Canceling those all can save you money every month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL.
We're going to do the best we can to look at what happened against the Packers.
Hail to the Commanders. It's the Commanders Squad. Everything Washington Commanders every week.
We're going to look at what happened with this offense. Clearly, the offensive line is a thing. There's also Jaden Daniels and his performance today. Not to mention a ton of injuries. I am sitting on the Game Day Garage set here. This is what we do every Thursday night. And, of course, it was at one point a packed garage full of Commanders fans. And about halftime, people started looking around going, look, big picture here first. We got a lot of things to get into over the next hour, Anthony. But I want to start with just something you said before we actually got on here. And it's a level of, are we worried, or do we look at this and just say, it's early in the season, let's not panic yet?
A little bit of both, honestly. A little bit of both, just because I don't think you expected to see this type of a performance. But me, I'm a realistic person. I always try to find the silver lining or something on that backside that gives you a little bit upbeat, something to think about. So essentially, I look at it like this. You don't play Green Bay that often, all right? And they really wanted to keep their momentum going from the first week. So they dialed up some stuff that, frankly, you weren't ready for. And sometimes as a coach, you walk in there and you say, hey, they beat us. They had a much better scheme put together than we were able to handle at that time. But the positive from this, and this is what I always take as a positive, is that you actually have a blueprint of what you're going to see from other teams. Right now, you know what teams are going to try to mirror what Green Bay has done. And then now you have to find a way to operate off of that. I mean, I was hearing people and having group chats saying Jaden looked a little bit off and, he's not really handling the pressure well. And that's because teams are dialing new things up. They're dialing new things up. And I'm glad to see it on week 2 against an opponent that, frankly, you won't see again until the playoffs. And now you're going up against the Vegas Raiders here in 10 days. So you got 1, time to heal up. 2, time to look at the tape, because frankly, they didn't get to break down or try to analyze that previous tape against the Giants. So I'm going to have a little bit of a pause, but I'm still a little bit nervous, Nick, a little nervous.
I think it's fair to be nervous given what we obviously saw in this game. And I think it's also, too, just the fact that there's a lot of narratives surrounding this team. And, right, narratives can be dangerous. I understand that, right? These can be artificial things that are drummed up at times. But the reality is there were questions about, this team coming off of a season last year where they vastly overachieved. And there's a lot of conversation about whether, that was so much of an overachievement that major regression was going to happen this year. 2 games into the season, you can't be talking about regression, but you do have to look at specific things that did go wrong, whether it's the offensive line and the protection. We also can look at this down the road and may come back to this game and go, oh, Green Bay is really good. So, this loss was just to a team that maybe ends up in the Super Bowl this year. So I think that's the one thing that we have to keep in mind with this. Now, granted, all we can go is what the sample size actually is right now. And the sample size is 2 games, and it's an offense that certainly looked out of sync at times. We talked about it after the Giants game, and we're certainly seeing that again after this Green Bay game as well, where, you didn't have guys like Terry McLaurin out there for most of camp. You had injuries, guys in and out throughout camp on the offensive line. Those are the types of things that don't put teams in a position to succeed once the regular season starts. Now, we also have to keep in mind, too, that, we don't really have much of a preseason anymore. So guys are practically using the first couple games of the regular season as a level of a preseason. I'll tell you where I am now. My panic level is, I'd say it's warm. We turned the burners up on the stove, but we're not at medium just yet. We're still below that. We're back a little bit farther, but I can feel it starting to at least creep in, where if we start to see consistent patterns and that leads into a game against the Raiders, like you mentioned, with all this time off, more time to prepare. And, listen, they're going to have to make some changes and some adjustments given the injuries that we saw in this game, too, that we'll certainly get to in the show as well. But I think those are the types of things that, you don't panic, but you have to kind of lock it away, if that makes sense, where you go, all right, I'm going to take this note down. And if I see it against the Raiders and I see it moving forward, then we got bigger issues going on.
Yeah, and then I will say this, too. You're playing against a good team, right? You're playing against a good team, and this is more of a litmus test. I think I said it on the previous show. We were saying, hey, this is a litmus test of you going against one of the top teams in the league, all right? And then right now you fell short, so you can only look at it as in that way. And now when you look at all the injuries that happened, right? Dietrich Wise Jr., Austin Eckler, unfortunately, a lot of injuries, a lot of people going down that doesn't help your case, right? So that can be demoralizing, frankly, as a team. You're just like, golly, somebody else is down. Like, we just need something to go well, and it didn't really work. It didn't really work out. I'm looking at the statistics here. Just the amount of carries versus passing attempts doesn't align. Zach Ertz leading the way with all the action. That's cool, but I need to have more yards. So obviously there's a lot to improve upon. Green Bay had a great game plan, Nick. And you know what? You study it, and you're going to see something similar, but you got to move on to the next team because it's a long season, and you don't have a bye week until week 14.
When you watch Green Bay, because I certainly saw a team that could go to the Super Bowl. I saw a defense that might end up being top 3 in the NFL, relentless pass rush. What do you see in Green Bay after this game?
Man, a problem. They're a problem on defense, and it's all because they added Micah Parsons. Like his ability to get off the line of scrimmage before our team even decided to move was blowing my mind. Like, the guy is extremely quick off the ball. I mean, we knew that, but now you got to see it again in a different color jersey. He helps transform that defense, and they can be that much more aggressive. The defensive coordinator was like, "Hey, man, let's get creative with this thing. How we want to attack, because he can win one-on-one." And it really opens things up for the backside of that defense. Teams can't develop plays like you used to, right? It's one of those things that when you play the Packers, you have to think strategically. We're going to get 7 possessions. You can't get behind the sticks. Like, it comes down to winning each and every play. And they're a really good team, right? They're a really good team, and something that you're going to look back to and just say, hey, we got to be able to beat them. I love having a target now, but it starts in the building. But Green Bay is going to be that one that you really want to make sure you get past.
And it's tough, too, when you look at the way the game started off. I mean, the way Green Bay was moving the ball, and bare minimum, even if they weren't, they were throwing deep balls. They were trying to go after the Washington secondary. They were trying to make plays and make back-breaking plays that were going to demoralize them. And quite frankly, I don't think there was a point in the game. I remember seeing it on the broadcast, and it really stood out to me. It was like, obviously it stood out. Let's be honest with the numbers I'm about to give you. Of course, it stood out. It was like average yards per play, I think, was around 8.7 for Green Bay, and it was 1.9 for Washington. And it's
that's not good.
You're not going to – and I mean, how many times, especially in that first half, Anthony, did you look and go, they're continuing to face – Washington was continuing to face these 3rd and longs, which were just downright impossible. You had that one point where it was 3rd and 17, and it was a 2-yard dump off to Austin Eckler. Like, it just felt like, I mean, when you see a team essentially mail it in and give up on a drive on 3rd down, which is essentially what that is, like, at least make an effort to throw the ball past the sticks. I would rather have a 20-yard incomplete pass on a 3rd and 17 than a 3rd and 17 that brings up a 4th and 15. Like they had. Like, it just that just to me is it feels like at that point they just looked like they didn't have answers for what Green Bay was throwing at them defensively.
Man, you know what, though? Jaden's going to still protect the ball. And that's what he did last year. And I saw in the comments, Tawanda put a great comment in there. We started 1-1 last year and then heated up, looking for the same thing this year, hopefully. And that's a good point, right? It does take a little bit. Teams are trying to scout you off of last year. They're making game plans to specifically beat you. They don't have to see you for a while. Andrew said, hey, we're not sniffing the playoffs. It's a long time. A lot of things can change before that happens. Hell, Sam Cosmi could be back, right? And that could be a helpful thing to think about. But ultimately, I'm not gonna let this ruin the season. It's 2 games. Mm-hmm. There's been 2 games. There's been 1 win and there's been 1 loss. Frankly, if we came out and played like this against the Giants, now maybe we're gonna put worry way up at the top of the list, right? It's Green Bay. This is a good team. They're a good team. They're a good team. We know where we're lacking right now, right? You got to clean up on the pass protection, right? In the secondary, they were testing them. They really were testing them, but that's because they had a lot of confidence in their pass protection. And when you don't have the pass rush trying to get to the quarterback like you have on Micah Parsons, hey, teams are going to take those chances and try to put the ball in the end zone on you.
Now, I know what I'm about to ask you is speculating, but let's play a game here. What do you think is being said in the locker room after this loss?
You know what? Dan, what we said in the beginning, you got to flush it, right? We're going to get back. We're going to fly home. We're going to break down this tape, and then we got to put it behind us. So the big rule is 24-hour rule, right? 24-hour rule. You want to make sure that you process it, but don't dwell on it too long, right? There's a big, long break. They're going to have a little bit of time to get better. But once again, it's a look in the mirror moment. I remember saying this last year. You got to look in the mirror and say, just who the hell you want to be? How do you want to show up as a player? How do you want to show up as a team? And what can you do to make sure that performance doesn't happen again? That's what Dan Quinn's got to tell them. What are you going to do these next couple of days? Because he's going to give them a day or two off maybe, right? Because they got a little bit of time before that next game. What are you going to do for yourself? How are you going to take yourself better? Because this can't happen again, all right? Pass protection. How are you going to improve, right? Everybody get together and talk it out. What are you going to do? But coaching, we talk about it. Andrew putting it in the chat. No pre-snap motions. He wants to talk about no pre-snap motion. You got to move people around, right? Coaches got to look at it. They got to self-scout. This is how you improve. It's not just call the plays and go out there and run it. This is a league where people are trying to take your head off. They are trying to embarrass you if they get that opportunity, and they're not trying to let up at one bit because, frankly, this is a team that can score a lot of points. Washington could. But Green Bay found a recipe that kept them in bay, kept that at bay, and they got to figure out how to beat that same recipe later on for the rest of the season.
It was a game of tight ends, too, in this. I'm looking at the numbers here. 6 catches, 64 yards, and a touchdown for Zach Ertz on 8 targets. Hope everybody listened to me in the last show to take the over 3.5 receptions for Zach Ertz. That thing cashed. I was getting a little nervous for a while, though. But, I mean, then on the other side of things, man, Tucker Kraft, 6 for 124 and a touchdown on 7 targets here. I mean, the one thing that, from a Washington perspective, is that you do have guys that, when they're out there, you know what you're going to get week in and week out. And Zach Ertz is right at the very top of that list where, like, you know, the floor is always going to be high. Even if the ceiling isn't something like, again, what Tucker Kraft put up today, or, you know, you still know what you're going to get from Zach Ertz, especially in the fourth quarter, when it felt like for a while. Like, let's remember here, too, it's not like this was a game that was out of reach the entire way through. There was that stretch where the Commanders were within a touchdown, and you're starting to think to yourself, maybe we actually have ourselves a game. It then completely went the other way. But there was a point there for a while where you did watch it and at least think Washington had an opportunity.
Yeah, I changed clothes before. I said, this ain't right. I got to switch it up, man. This is not what I was envisioning happening tonight. I got too many Packers fans in my life that I got to see over the next 2-3 days. But no, I thought they had, you know, they've shown last year they can find ways to win. They found ways to win 7-8 different ways last year. I felt that same type of vibe going on because they had the defensive stop, they get the touchdown. So I'm like, okay, things are starting to work. And plus, the way the Ravens and the Bills game went, anything can happen in this game, right? So I was hoping for something, but they just ran out of juice, man. They just ran out of juice. We'll talk about Lattimore. I think before we go there, I was thinking about the running back room and how there wasn't much performance there. And I was thinking, man, I think you really need to have that bigger body of Chris Rodriguez. I think that's a thing. Of him being able to move the pile, but now obviously with the injury, but with Austin Eckler, you know, you're assuming that Rodriguez is going to be in the mix because non-contact injury like that. I mean, that's probably tough. He's probably out for the whole season. So that's tough. But I think now you got to get Rodriguez in the mix, find a way to be physical up front again, because 42 passes, that ain't it. That's not the recipe. I think I forget what Dan Quinn said last year, but 42 and then like a total of like 15 or 20, 19 carries. That's not a winning formula for this team.
The NFL season is finally here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your first bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, same-game parlays, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Tony, let's start with the 1-0 Jacksonville Jaguars, who ran all over the Carolina Panthers in week 1. What is the biggest storyline this week going into Sunday's game?
Well, good to see you, James. And it is a battle. The second week in a row, the Jaguars have to kill another predator, another cat. Last week, it was a panther. This year's going to be a tiger. This is a little harder to do because tigers are big, right? But I think the key to last week's game was them adapting and really going with the new thing. It gets real easy, man. When you come out, you get this new thing, sort of like we saw Caleb Williams on Monday night. Everything's going well, but what happens when somebody punches you in the face and things don't go well? So Mother Nature punched the Jaguars in the face, and there was like a 40-minute rain delay, right? And the rain never came. But when they came back out, they didn't seem like the same team. So they had to switch it up a little bit, and they had to rely on something that was missing in the past that Liam Cohen, the head coach, swore that they would have this time. They just got really, really physical on both lines of scrimmage and started to run the football, and Travis Etienne ended up with 143 yards. Physicality made up for the fact that they lost a little bit of their mojo and their chemistry during the rain delay, and that's something they weren't able to do in the past.
Yeah, I think that it's a really good point to bring up, because I think when I think of Jacksonville, I'm thinking of Trevor Lawrence, thinking of Brian Thomas, thinking of Travis Hunter, thinking of flash and big plays. And I'm not thinking of Travis Etienne as much. I'm not thinking of that ground attack. And for a Bengals defense that did pretty well against the run in the week 1 against the Browns, that's an underrated storyline. Is you got to have to match the Jaguars' physicality as well, because obviously they showed they could run the ball at a really high level against Carolina.
Yeah, they want to be a chunk yardage team. They want to get explosive. They want to get big plays and get the ball to all of those people that you talked about. But Liam Cohen comes from running the football. The Rams have done it with their stretch plays and their zone, and then you saw it with Tampa last year. And even going back to his college days, I call it the Ray Davis game, when the Buffalo Bills running back Ray Davis was at Kentucky and they played Florida, and he got like 10 yards every time he ran the ball. And I remember as a Seminole supporter going, who the hell is that offensive coordinator? And he ends up coaching the team that I cover here in the NFL. So my thing is, running the ball is essential. It's not about whether you're successful all the time with it, but you have to be able to do it when you want to and when you have to. And the Jaguars in the past weren't able to do either. They would get to the red zone and have to throw the ball, and you know that 12th man on that back line is an extra defender. They were never able to convert third or fourth and 1. Now they can at least keep drives going. Even if they get 3.5 yards a carry, you do that 3 times and it's a first down.
For sure. And I think that's a major storyline, how the Bengals defense, and that's really the talk of things, is this defense for real? Is what we saw in the second half of that matchup against the Cleveland Browns, is that what they're going to be? Because they were really good against the run, holding the Browns to just 2 yards per carry. But now you have a team that, shocker, has a better quarterback than Joe Flacco, and Flacco played well, has weapons that are of the elite status when it comes to Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr. And now you have to think about this running game as well. And so I think the biggest story, I could totally make it about the offense, but I'm not sure anyone deep down is concerned about the offense struggling internally with the Bengals. I do think that what this defense is still a major question mark. And so there's a mixture of things, but I think that this defense, they're going to be challenged in a way this week that they weren't challenged last week when you just look at the overall skill players and the talent that the Jags have on offense.
Yeah, man, it's all about speed. Travis Hunter had 6 catches on 8 targets last week, and he had about 37, 38 yards. But you can tell what they were doing. They were option routes. They're being very patient. Get 5 yards, turn the ball upfield, get the little lean, and go down. But those things, as the season progresses, are going to turn into big games, because he gets an opportunity to shake one guy. You mentioned Brian Thomas Jr. We expect a big jump from him. He scored a touchdown on an end around last week. Not a whole bunch in the passing game, right? And they've kind of been a little off, to be honest, during the preseason as well as training camp. And, he's expected to make that next step. I'm sure he will. But there's another piece to this. De'Ami Brown, who came over from Washington, didn't have a whole bunch of stats, but he played really well at the end of last season. One of those games was in Tampa, and Liam Cohen saw it firsthand. De'Ami Brown was big. And when you add the 3 of them, because they play a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, those guys are all fast. So now when we talk about having to respect the running game, and you're talking about guys getting to their windows and stacking the defensive backs really, really fast, you have 3 guys that can do that, and that'll produce chunk plays when you get them one-on-one.
Yeah, that's the I don't want to say the fear, but my thoughts are like, man, they just have so many different guys to use and lean on in different ways. It's going to be interesting to see this Bengals defense, how they react. I also think from an offense standpoint, and it is a big storyline, of course, especially nationally. Oh my goodness, Joe Burrow and the Bengals, 1 first down and 2 net yards and all of those things. I think they're like, all right, keep saying it, because Joe Burrow did have a good training camp. Joe Burrow was awesome and was dialed in, and I thought had the best, not just the best training camp of his career, but it's the best I've seen him, period. And it looked like it in that first half against the Browns. He was 11 of 14 for 88 yards and a touchdown, and they were moving the ball up and down the field, scored touchdowns on 2 of their first 3 possessions, and then things stalled out. So can they get back on track? I'll say this, Tony. They need to. They have to play much better if this Bengals team is going to get to 2-0. And this is the other major storyline. Zach Taylor is 0-6 in week 2.
Ooh.
He has never won. He has never won in week 2. And so the Bengals are trying to do something they've never done, which is start 2-0 under Zach Taylor with Joe Burrow at quarterback.
Well, you need I was doing Locked On NFL last year, and when they lost that game, I think it was to the Patriots early in the year.
Yep.
I told whoever, I said, man, y'all watch it. And it ended up being one of the reasons why they came up half a game short to make the playoffs. I'm afraid that if people are looking at last week going, that's what the Bengals are going to do every week, they're wrong. They're going to have some opportunities this week. The Jaguars play zone. You get great receivers and a great quarterback, they'll bust that zone up all the way. I want to see if the Jaguars can force the offensive line of Cincinnati to hold on. You know what I mean? You got to be able to cover those guys fast enough and enough that you allow Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen, who had a whole bunch of they only had 1 sack, but they had a whole bunch of pressures. That's going to be the key to the game. The key to the game is you cannot let Joe Burrow dink and dunk you with those receivers, and then you got to make sure you tackle Jamar Chase in particular, because he can turn a routine play into a big one. I think the key to the game is going to be right there. You guys' offense versus the Jaguars' defense, because they played well last week, but this is a whole nother animal when you're talking about the skill position players. And I ain't going to forget about Brown, the running back. It's going to be a big part of whether they win or lose.